Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today I want to give you a little bit of a story and talk to you about my experience of how important fishing current on rivers and lakes can affect your day and how the fish move based on that current. This is something that really has become very apparent to me ever since COVID started. So we're talking 3 years ago. I will say one of the best things that's come out of that for me is I ended up spending a ton of time fishing with my boys right down here on the river. We spent a lot of days just throwing night crawlers and minnows off the bank and catching a pile of fish. And when you do that almost every day and you do it in the same spot, what you recognize is a pattern of not only the type of fish you're catching, but where you're catching them. And one thing that I think is interesting regarding this is, generally speaking, most bank fishermen, I feel, like to make a long cast. They like to get as far away from where they're at as possible, because the idea, like most fishermen feel, is the further you go, the more fish you're gonna run into, right? Like there can't be fish that are close to you. Well, one thing that I definitely found out real quick was that those fish would move based on the current. We'd come down one day and they'd either be in the main channel or they'd be right under our feet, actually. I mean, within 10 feet of the bank. And if you sat there and had your lines too far out, you wouldn't catch them. If you had them too far in, you wouldn't catch them. But it really became very apparent that these fish moved based on current more than anything. You could throw in the fact that water level makes a difference too, but in reality, the current is dictating what the water level is. So on the river behind me, we've got a dam 4 miles upstream. If they let a lot of water out, the water level comes up, but the current starts ripping. So it's kind of works in parallel to a point. Now that's not always the case, but a lot of times your water level does come up with more current and it falls with less current. That's just how it is, whether you're on a reservoir or a river system. But what I want to point out here is kind of the movement that we see, because we've had a lot of fluctuation now on the river behind me over the last couple of days. We went from getting a ton of rain, the river came up to the point it was in my yard, and it was blasting current-wise down the river. Well, we did come down and fish, and we caught a bunch of fish, and the fish that we caught were literally within 10 feet of the bank, to the point where they were right on the bank. Now you can see behind me, we've got about I'm gonna say an 8-foot ledge that goes down to the water. So that ledge is almost straight vertical. So when the water came up the fish were pulled up tight to the bank. Now they were within the first 10 feet of the bank. Some were at the bases of these trees, others were slightly out. But what I can tell you is when the current rips, we get a little bit of a current seam that is about 10 feet off the bank. So you're talking about having slacker water, slower moving current from the bank to about 10 feet out. Once you get 10 feet out, you get almost main river style current, and therefore it's a really swift current. So you would think that fish would normally want slower current, but that's not actually true. Most of the time, I think the fish would actually prefer stronger current. The thing is, when you have very fast current, what it ends up doing is pushing a lot of those fish to the bank, because they want to sit in eddies and behind objects so that they don't have to expel energy to swim in that current. The other location it generally pushes them to is straight to the bottom. So the majority of your eddies are going to be on the bank, or they're going to be on the bottom. So if you have a rock or a little bit of a ledge, those fish get tight to the bank and they'll sit, or tight to the bottom, and they'll sit in any sort of eddy that they can find that's actually under the water, as well as that's shoreline related. But a good portion of your fish are going to come closer to the bank. Now that's in high water, fast moving current. If you're fishing, like say now, and maybe you guys can see this, but you can actually see exposed bank on the other shoreline. So the river has probably come down, I'm gonna say 8 feet, to the point now it's actually at low summer water levels. So a lot of your shoreline related cover isn't actually in the water. As you can see on that bank that's across from me, a lot of that undercut bank, a lot of the little tree roots, things that were on the bank that would provide cover during faster current, a little bit higher water, are not there now. But the key to recognize is that's not actually why the fish are not on the bank. It's not a lack of cover. You can still find plenty of covered fish, but it's not going to be as productive. The key is they're actually looking for stronger current. And the strongest current right now is out in the middle of the channel, because that's where the majority of it's being deflected to. Now, if I were on an outside bend, the outside bend of the river would be where the majority of the current is. The key is you want to identify in low water periods where the current is, because you have such a slower current that the fish are going to try to utilize any little bit of current that they can find to their advantage to help them to feed. So once you identify those areas, whether that's an outside bend, or maybe you've got a shallow riffle, or maybe you've got some place where the current really gets pinched down, once you identify those areas that have more current than the rest of the parts of the river or the lake that you're on, then you want to identify those objects within that area that provide still a current break, an ambush location. Could be a big boulder, could be a lay down tree, could be just still an undercut bank. But it's really interesting to me how those fish move. I'll come down one day and we'll have faster current, and the fish will be close to our bank, within 30 feet, I'll say. If we have what I consider falling water, so we had higher water levels dropping, current has slacked up, our bites are coming almost as far out in the river channel as I can get, because that's where we've got a little bit deeper water, there's a little bit of a ledge. The fish are going to be pulled out there because the current's not so fast that they can't be out in it. They generally just want to be in the fastest current possible, but use as little energy as possible. It's counterproductive for them if they're out there swimming as hard as they can to try to get a meal. It just doesn't work. They'd much rather sit behind something and let the current bring them the food. But it is very, very interesting to me how those fish slide up and down within hours. As soon as they close the dam up, those fish will stop from being on the bank to sliding out to deeper water. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, they stopped biting because they didn't generate. That's true to a point. I do think the fish are more active with more current, but I also think they move quite a bit more and spread out more. We'll be sitting here and I can literally see that the current has stopped. And within minutes, or within, I'd say, an hour, our bites go from shallow to being further out. And that's just because the fish are repositioning. So a lot of times I feel like the anglers need to reposition, which is hard to do, especially if you don't even recognize that the current level has dropped off. But a lot of times people are fishing the areas that were productive with faster moving current, but then don't move away or readjust based on the current change. And that goes the opposite way too. You might be fishing the middle of the channel, and I see this from walleye guys on the river all the time. They're up in the middle of the river because they think that's where all the walleye are, and they're catching them when the current is slow. But as soon as they open up gates on the dam, those walleye pull in close to shore just like the bass do. And I know that because I catch them when I'm bass fishing, and I catch them when I'm throwing crawlers and minnows off the bank. I see the same movement. So it's really interesting to see the adjustment of fish. And I will say, not all of the species are the same. We catch a lot of sturgeon, we catch a lot of catfish, and a lot of carp. And there is definitely different adjustments based on those water levels. The sturgeon are almost the complete opposite of the bass, meaning the sturgeon, when the current's ripping, seem like they're out further, they're just going to be in the deeper holes. But as soon as the water levels drops or the current stops, they pull up to the backside of a deep hole lip, which happens to be kind of in front of the house, which is one of the reasons why we've got a pretty good little sturgeon hole. The point here is, it is interesting to see how you get one group of fish in one condition will go into one location, and they just kind of move around on what's best for their feeding habits. But the key here is just to recognize that on a hourly basis, based on current flow, you want to adjust. You see the same thing happen, and the best TVA ledge anglers are fully aware of where they need to be based on current generation. So it's not just a river, it's also, you know, man-made reservoirs you see this on, to the point where you can see it on natural lakes just based on wind direction. If you've got good weed growth, maybe you've got topped out grass, or you've got a long point that sticks out into a lake, you can use that wind generated current to your advantage as well. But I thought it would be pretty apparent just to see, based on water level. If you've watched some of my videos, you've probably seen how the water was high, you know, not too long ago, and now it's way back down, and the fish are just going to adjust. So you want to use the current to your advantage. You want to try to understand the fish movement based on the current. It really is important to your success, because in my opinion, current is probably the #1 thing that you can use to dictate fish location. If you can understand the current and how fish move based on the current, you will dramatically increase the number of fish you catch. So I hope this was helpful, guys. If it was, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Stay tuned, we'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.